Looks like there could be some email issues. I have Jessica saying, does I have to sign in using the email assigned by the host, but my email is not working to sign on. So I'm going to go to Zoom and resend everybody invites.
I was having the same issue, but all I did was just sign in to your
Okay,
existing Zoom account. So I don't know if that's probably the same issue for everyone else.
Sarah, our power was out, so it could be that people were running into
That's
trouble.
true.
I ran into some too.
I see, I see. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna quickly just push another round of invites to all the panelists.
Yeah, I'm assuming that some of the people that are not in the meeting are dealing with the power outage right now. I believe a lot of like
Got it.
Oswego residents are out of power currently, and there's been a 2 hour delay for three of the elementary schools to open. So yeah,
Got it. Wow. Okay. Well, it might just be a small meeting now. Um, but because it's being recorded and it's on YouTube, I'll just get going since we have a packed schedule today. Once I okay. I think people just need the to call in if um okay. So hopefully Jessica can join shortly. Um I just sent her the call-in number. All right. Well, so before we start, we do have to vote on the last meeting's meeting minutes. Right now, the chair and the vice chair aren't here, so I'll leave it up to the tree task force members that are in the room right now.
should one of us say that we're approving the minutes or
Yeah, if one of you wants
okay,
to make a
okay,
motion,
okay.
yeah.
I can make the motion to approve the meeting minutes from October 22nd, 2025 on the True Task Force meeting.
This is Jason. I can second that motion.
Looks like we have Mark in the room, Amy, and Matthew.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just getting to my desk.
Sure, I vote yes. This is Mark.
Are we voting on the meeting minutes?
Yes.
Correct.
I vote as well. Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
And Sarah, it looks like we have Jack as an attendee, but not a panelist, just FYI.
Christine is the host, so Christine, can you move him in?
The host? Oh gosh. Okay.
No, sorry, other Christine. Other Christine.
Okay.
They
Great, thank
should
you.
be in.
All right, great.
Deanne was emailing that she had the same Zoom access issue.
Seems like that's been a thing. I would say if people. Strange. So, Christine Sequina, I'm gonna send people the registration link. So we're probably going to have some people joining the waiting room, or be in the waiting room, or be
Okay, I'll keep
attendee.
an eye on it. Make sure everybody gets in.
That's really strange. But let's see.
Looks like Morgan was able to join as a panelist.
Yeah, I had to create a Zoom account with my email address and then it let me in.
That's what I had to do too.
Interesting. Pauline, I just got your message. I can't edit any settings of the webinar while it's going, so people are just going to have to either call in or join from the registration link. If anybody else, okay. I cannot create a new meeting. I'm not really sure how to do that at this point.
Do you
Sarah,
want
I
me
think
to?
that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I can
I'm just going to
try
invite.
doing it on my end. But yeah, let me know how I can help.
Sarah, I think that we should probably get going, and I can help troubleshoot for those who aren't able to
Yeah,
get in.
so if you go to participants, on the bottom of the list, it says invite, and you can invite people specific in email. So I recommend doing that. That's what I was just doing. But yes, I agree that we should get going. So for our people that just joined, the members present at the beginning of the meeting just approved the meeting minutes. And I just have the task force charge statement here as well, reminding everyone just to keep top of mind that as a task force member, your role is to align the proposed changes with the UCFP, ensure that they enhance the long-term sustainability of Lake Oswego, and that they comply with state law, namely clear and objective standards. Oh, it looks like I skipped past the agenda as well. So I'll be giving an update on the project schedule and then a brief report out on the stakeholder and public engagement memo that you received, which was part of the first phase of the project. But most of the discussion today will be focusing on two work sessions we just had. One with the City Council on the code concepts and another with the Planning Commission earlier this month. So they provided some feedback and some direction on these code concepts, and we have discussion questions prepared based on their feedback. So right now we are in the middle of of this project, and it's a pivotal point where we're moving from code concepts into draft code. So once the city staff and city attorney go over a first draft, we will be bringing you a second draft to the next tree task force meeting, meeting number 5, to provide feedback and detailed input. In my email, I provided a link to a Google form in case anyone had any other questions to address related to code concepts. It sounded like there were a couple remaining questions. I did get one, and somebody was wondering when we would have time to work on the remaining substantive issues, aside from the 4 that we did these code concepts for. And that's a great question. This will be in meeting number 5 when there's some draft code to look over. The code concepts were kind of instructive and high level and really will help direct the rest of the substantive issue list. It doesn't look like they're here, but I've noted their interest in wildfire safe landscaping, and we can keep this in mind when planning a discussion for this first draft. Once we get initial input from you, we'll have subsequent drafts that are presented at 2 joint meetings for city staff and a meeting with stakeholders and focus group members. And then there'll be also work sessions with the Council and Planning Commission, again, with the draft code. And we're hoping to schedule the last and 6th tree task force meeting around that time, so you can provide feedback on the more refined concepts when they're a little bit closer to being finalized. So a large part of the first phase of the project was engagement. And we didn't go over it last time since we had it was really important to go over code concepts. But all of this engagement contributed directly to the key issue list that we're at right now, as well as the code concepts. So in September and October, there were 7 stakeholder focus groups, some of which you all attended, to identify specific aspects of the code that present challenges and collect any suggestions for improvement. So this list will look familiar from the memo that you were sent today as part of the meeting packet. Oops, yes. And then there were some key themes that popped out in these groups, all which support the 12 key substantive issues and the 25 key technical issues on the list. And many people had comments that aligned with what we're hearing from you as well. So these contributed to the code concepts as well and how we're funneling them into the code amendments. For public engagement, we tabled at 2 in-person events and also hosted an online survey with the same questions. The first event was the Lake Oswego Emergency Preparedness Fair, which was really well attended. It was super busy, and we interacted with a lot of the Lake Oswego community at large, which included many homeowners and a lot of people really passionate about trees. The Urban Forest Summit on November 1st was a little smaller group of people interested in tree education, and people connected with community-based organizations and advocacy groups. The survey link as well was distributed at both of these events, and we got 118 survey responses. We asked these groups to provide feedback on the key issues list and also asked them to let us know what they love the most about Lake Oswego's urban forest and what their biggest concerns are as well. Since people could select as many key issues as possible, there were 772 selections. So generally, all of them showed support. Everyone who responded to this question showed support for the key issues list that you all helped develop. Written concerns that kind of gave more details about what people were concerned about echoed the key issues list as well. And so it helps us understand that the project's current focus and the key issues list is headed in the right direction and aligns with the public. We got a lot of questions, especially at the in-person events, about what code changes would look like, which was a good segue into sharing the project process of turning best practices into code concepts, and then finally, multiple drafts. Overall, though, the Lake Oswego community is really fond and passionate about the urban forest. They love trees and the tree canopy for the many wonderful benefits it provides them. And the information in the memo that you received hopefully gives you some context for what the public values to help direct your input as part of the task force and give you some context. So are there any questions or comments about the memo?
I have one, Sarah. This is it was very helpful to get the feedback of the focus groups. And what I raised as a question, which I sent, is how we, as a group, the represent the more subjective terminology and translate that into something that represents these particular views without it being diminished or eliminated because it's subjective and the language needs to be different. This is the concern I hear over and over again from neighbors and friends. And I want to make sure that we are, as a group, we are addressing this in the best way we can.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question, and I think a almost an existential question about community engagement as a whole. We are kind of pulling themes out and taking what we hear to direct us. Was there any specific comments or points that were brought up that you feel are subjective that you want to make sure we don't lose the thread on, or you want to make sure are pulled through the process?
I would say the comments I hear the most from neighbors are the concern about the loss of significant trees, and the concern expressed is, can we even use the term significant anymore? And is that considered too subjective? But how is it that people indicate these concerns about preservation and not allowing for wholesale reduction of trees within a lot without using language that matters to neighbors? It's a fine line. I understand the task force and the community changes to the tree code has a mandate, and that the language is trying to be less subjective. However, it's the subjective that was expressed by Council Member Babu 2 meetings ago, and it's a very important aspect of what the focus groups are underscoring. So it's not
Yeah,
just
thank you.
aesthetics, it's an attitude of preservation rather than some of the attitudes in development and property owning, clearing of lots.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Amy. Before I pass it over to Mark, and open it up to anybody else as well, I do think that from what we're hearing from council so far and what we're hearing from you all, and from all of the research into how the existing code is doing, I think that the primary value that stuck out among all groups is that this is a preservation-based code. Nobody is really like erring on the side of tree loss. Nobody wants significant tree loss, and everybody's on the same page that this code currently is preservation focused and should continue to be preservation focused. You are right that the term significant tree can no longer is not clear and objective, so it can't be used anymore. But that's part of the code concept that's suggesting that we then specify native species of trees and also try to build in some tools in the code concepts that favor or consider the maturity of a tree and the health of trees. But let me hand it over to Mark. Do you have your hand up?
I just wanted to echo what Amy stated, and you just mentioned the basically defining what a significant tree is, size, species, location, and use of the tree being a street tree versus something in the back. Those kind of items could be put into the code and to be very measurable and therefore fulfill the requirements of the state.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, there is going to be a draft code that you're looking at that ideally and hopefully will address all the issues on the substantive issue list and technical issue list. And things like changing the definition of a significant tree and defining that is part of that list as well. So you haven't seen like everything that's coming out of these code changes, these code concepts, were just to kind of understand some of the major levers that are pushing and pulling on the code overall. And one of them is that we found out that, the council is kind of be supportive of a preservation-based code. So, yeah, does anyone else from the project team want to respond to this? Or does anyone else from the tree task force have any ideas or further questions or comments about this? Yes, Jack.
Yeah, I wanted to address the part about significant trees. And my understanding is there will still be a track within type 2 where significant trees would be considered, but there's this new alternative track related to housing development where there's an alternative to that. So for some tree removals, significant tree language would still be used. Is that correct?
This is, it looks like Jessica was about to answer, but I believe that we are updating the definition for significant trees as part of the technical items. Is that correct, Jessica?
Yeah, one of the things that we want to do, you're absolutely right, Jack. The recommendation of and Sarah's gonna get to this if she hasn't already. We want to keep a 2-track system because we don't want to bring everything down to the level of clear and objective standards. So we like that flexibility, and not just but we heard that also from the feedback from the council and the planning commission as well. So we do plan to have that 2-track system, but we do need to work on our existing criteria, even though what we're keeping. There's ways that we need to improve and clean that up. And the definition of significant tree is one where a good place for us to start because it is still pretty subjective. And while we may not make it purely clear and objective, it definitely needs to be improved over what's there today.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. Yes, and thank you, Amy, for bringing this up. It's a really important point to bring up now, and it's an important point to keep bringing up later when we also have the full draft in front of us. So, yeah, I encourage you to keep bringing this up to this group and looking at the draft that gets sent to you in a few months under that same lens.
Thank you.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm going to move on to providing an update for the code concept discussions and work sessions we had with council and the planning commission. So like our previous meeting, I'll go through the 4 code concepts, and each one will have the same agenda. I'll give you a brief overview of the concept, just to remind you what the function is, report back on what both the planning commission and the council said. And then we have some questions for you. Both the planning commission and council raised some important questions, and we'd like your feedback on some of the items that were brought up in those conversations. So the first concept, the biggest one, most meatiest, is the creating clear and objective standards for residential development. So it essentially has 3 parts, and I polled you all on these separately last time. The first is the percentage-based retention standards, with either the option to use DBH as the denominator or total trees as the denominator to increase flexibility and kind of account for unique lots and things like that. Second, when calculating these retention percentages, the concept suggested an exemption for trees within the building envelope for smaller lots, so lots equal or less than 5,000 square feet. And then the last part is the elimination of an alternatives analysis if the retention percentages, either of them, are met, to expedite development, and bonus credits in the calculation for native trees that would be classified further in the tree list and in the code. So I have a couple slides like this for reporting back, and I have these thumb icons for you as well to show kind of general consensus or that different groups were leaning in one direction, but maybe didn't reach full consensus. Although it's important to note that we didn't do any official polling or voting with the council or commission. So where the tree task force last time we had polls, we didn't do that with the council or planning commission, and the thumbs represent just kind of the general level of support. So after I provide you with this feedback, I'll look to you as professionals for your guidance on turning these code concepts into draft code. The tree task force, planning commission, and council were across the board supportive of the set of DBH-based and total tree-based retention standards, and across the board supportive of having bonus credits for native trees. There was a question from the Planning Commission about if percentages could be different or maybe lowered for affordable housing development to make it easier to develop affordable housing. And there were also some questions from council about the small lot building envelope exemption. There wasn't really consensus on this from the council or the planning commission. There was some back and forth. Council mostly wanted to get some more examples of how this would play out on different lots and to see if trees in the building envelope should be exempted for lots that are all sizes or larger than 5,000 square feet. So regarding the affordable housing question first from the Planning Commission, the question was, should we lower the preservation bar for affordable housing specifically? So, if the retention-based standard was 33%, should affordable housing only have to meet a 25% standard or a 30% standard? And there is a risk here for reducing canopy for low-income residents and those who benefit from affordable housing. And there are currently existing incentives in place. So right now in Lake Oswego, if an affordable housing project does not preserve the minimum required amount of trees, they don't have to pay a mitigation fee under the city's current fee exemption for affordable housing that's in the fee schedule. And there's not a proposed change to this. So the project team thinks that this current fee exemption is enough of a barrier of reduction and no further reductions in standards for affordable housing is necessary, since it could possibly result in uneven tree removal and uneven tree canopy, and potentially more tree loss than is necessary. So our question to you as a tree task force to discuss is, should we explore further incentives for affordable housing or leave it as is? This would take a little bit more research from the team, to come up with some ideas, and then one of them would be included in the draft code amendments to then bring to all of you and council and planning commission as well to respond to. But our recommendation is to leave it as is, not add any more affordable housing exemptions. Yes, Jason.
Yeah, just to make sure I'm clear, leaving it as is would mean just waiving the fee. So currently there's a fee exemption, and that's what you're asking with this question. Do we just leave it at that and no further change?
Correct.
Thanks.
My opinion is to just leave it as is, since there is already an incentive, and with affordable housing developments, we're trying to get as many units in the lot as possible. So I'm just afraid that if there are further incentives related to tree removal, then we'll be looking at a lot of trees being removed. Therefore, yeah, I think we'll be seeing some more trees being removed than we would have expected. So I say leave it as is.
This is Mark.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna,
I agree.
I'm not sure if we're taking an official vote here, but I'm in agreement with Yuko. I think, I'm glad that we have the incentive, this fee waiver, but I think, they should still keep with the character of the community, and keeping that level of tree cover consistent across every type of project will be most appropriate, I think.
Yes, thank you. And I heard Mark unmute too and say that he agree. We're not doing an official poll for this. I just kind of wanted to hear what people were thinking, and it seems like most of you, I've seen some head noddings, and the ones who have spoken are feeling aligned with just leaving it as is. But Jack, your hand is raised. Welcome to add on.
Yeah, I have a little bit different perspective. I think the framing of this is looking at the affordable housing side of things, that we could reduce the percentage of trees retained. Another way to look at it is have the affordable housing be the baseline or the minimum standard being met, and then have a higher threshold for non-dense housing. For example, if you were remodeling a single family home, that would be using the same code as building new affordable housing. So you could look at the kind of the other end of the spectrum and adjust the upper threshold instead of looking at lowering the minimum.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. My initial reaction to that is I think it's affordable housing is a very clear, like federally defined type of housing where the only other term that we're able to kind of talk about in the code is needed housing, which is what the clear and objective mandate by the state is supposed to be serving. It's supposed to be serving the production of needed housing. But once you start going even further to specify housing types, I don't necessarily think that that would be received well by the community. And of course, that's just me having heard what the council has been thinking and what the community at large and the public would feel about that. I think it would be very hard to justify further splitting the term needed housing into housing types and like creating a hierarchy of what's kind of more deserving of more lax standards or what's needs more stringency. I think that would be pretty difficult, but I find that a really interesting concept. And if anybody else has any other thoughts about that, feel free to jump in. Because needed housing is defined by the clear and objective standard mandate, and that includes single family. So it's just any housing.
So to clarify, the obligation is to provide clear and objective tree removal track for any housing, any housing development. But within that, we could be more specific and break it down, or we could treat all housing development equally under the code.
Yes, I think we could break it down specifically for affordable housing since that is a very defined and unique housing type that is often often has pieces of code specifically for affordable housing, but I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it would be really feasible to break down housing types into anything beyond affordable housing and housing.
So my suggestion under this example would be affordable housing would be the 33%, and then anything that's not affordable housing could be set at say 50%. That is one way it could be written.
Yes, and that was the suggestion.
Just to clarify, when we say affordable housing, we mean like capital A, like deeded affordable housing. not like naturally occurring affordable housing.
I'm just trying to figure out what frameworks would be possible within the code.
Yes, and that's the exact suggestion that the Planning Commission was chewing over. Should I understand that you're saying that affordable housing is the standard and people should be going above and beyond kind of a higher percentage for anything else. But I think it still kind of introduces some of the same issues, and we'd have to nail down the retention percentages, right, to make sure that that higher percentage that everything that isn't deeded affordable housing has to meet isn't unreasonable and doesn't result in unreasonable cost and delay, and that it doesn't just put so many developments into the discretionary track that nothing really changes. But Jessica, you unmuted.
Yeah, I'm really thinking, noodling on this, and a couple of things I'm struggling with. The first is that I know that under the Middle Housing Statute, HB 2001, we specifically can't be more restrictive for middle housing types than we do for single family residents. So for that, in that way, in state law, the bar is single family residents. Like we can't do anything more restrictive. So I'm trying to figure out how that might play into this. And then for the affordable housing thing, I mean, it just doesn't seem like an incentive to. I'm trying to figure out what the logic is behind this by saying, okay, well, you establish it as being affordable housing, but that's not really an incentive to affordable housing. It doesn't really. That's not going to provide any meaningful affordable housing. Affordable housing is hard to do. I guess it removes one a little bit barrier in the tree code, but I feel like what we're proposing already kind of addresses that. So I'm not really sure that it's going to help make affordable housing easier to build. So I'm just trying to figure out what is the point of doing that? Like, are we trying to provide an incentive? Or why are we establishing affordable housing as the minimum? I guess I need to tease out the logic more on this. And I have concerns about state law.
My framework is trying to balance the required clear and objective with the goals of the urban and community forestry plan, which is around retaining tree canopy. So that's where we're going to do the best job possible that we can providing housing, reducing housing barriers while also retaining as much tree canopy as we can. So I think that's.
I have a response to Jessica's question. I can see how it could be an incentive for those that are developing affordable housing or middle housing because as a commissioner of the DRC, we did come across a public hearing on some tree removals for middle housing development of cottage cluster homes. And that's a special style of development where we have all these like smaller homes that's surrounding like a one open um, open space in the middle. So in order to lay that out, they did have to remove quite a bit of trees to get that to work. And so, yeah, I could see how that would be having that incentive would help out those types of developments, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and those weren't affordable housing, like those aren't income
Yeah, it's middle housing, so not necessarily affordable housing, but yeah, it's different than your typical single family development, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for that idea, Jack. And I think it sounds like, although a lot of people are saying that they're comfortable with the incentives for affordable housing as is, just being the fee exemptions, it sounds like we should uh, look into the percentages a little bit more and see if maybe that there's a way to offer different percentages and see kind of play around with what the impacts of that would be. So yeah, thank you for advocating for that. We will continue to explore that a bit, but we can move on to the next piece unless anybody has anything new to add about the affordable housing incentives? Right. Okay, so on to the next piece we'd like your feedback on, and this kind of dovetails right into the discussion we were just having about, right sizing these retention percentages. Is that these percentages that we've put in the code concept, like we said many times, are TBD. And to determine what these percentages look like for the first draft, the consultant team plans to look at the peer cities that were in the peer jurisdictions memo and look at what they are currently using, performing some case studies on how different percentages play out on different lots in Lake Oswego, kind of ground truthing and taking one lot and seeing what would this result in if applied. And then also looking at some recent development projects that have gone through, looking at how the existing code played out in tree preservation, what happened, and then how the proposed code changes, the proposed percentages might result in different outcomes than the existing code. So we turn to you all to ask what other information would be the most helpful to consider when determining appropriate thresholds for these percentages. It sounds like, Jack, you're saying affordable housing. Does affordable housing want to be kind of the standard, and do we want to have a slightly higher one for other developments? That's something that would be important to consider when we're kind of trying to right size these percentages. But are there any other types of data or places you want us to look? Yes, Mark.
One thing you might look at is the function of the particular tree in question, whether it's a street tree or whether it's helping with land, making sure that the land stays in its place. So those kind of things would also be important to look at.
Deanne?
Okay, I don't know how this would play into code, but since you're saying what, like, are there other things we should think about or be aware of? I think I would want to talk with the arborist and about the impact of removing one tree on another tree. So sometimes, let's say you have a group of 3 really tall Doug firs or something, and then you're allowed to remove a couple of them based on our code, and you leave one Doug fir standing alone, then it can have an impact on the future health and safety of that, the health of that tree and the safety of any nearby targets, because then that tree might become more vulnerable to wind movement and weather conditions and things like that. So again, I don't know, I have no idea how to codify that, but I think it is something to be aware of and to have expert opinion inform whatever we do.
Yeah, thank you. I'm definitely hearing some more kind of specific, like, ecological considerations for trees, both from you and from Mark. I'm trying to think about how you would build that into how to set like a high level percentage on a lot. And I'm more thinking of, yeah, I'm just not sure where to look for where it's kind of a perspective that's more than just a tree by tree basis, because there's not a way to set these percentages when looking at a tree by tree basis. You're trying to look at more trends. We're trying to look at, yeah, trends and things that work from a policy standpoint. But that's just what I'm thinking about right now. I'll pass it off to Jason.
Yeah, so maybe I'm not fully understanding how these percentages are intended to work, but are these 2 separate options that a landowner could choose from? And then yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Let me just go to the last slide here. So as it's proposed, and as the Tree Task Force, Planning Commission, and Commission supported, we're supporting this option where like the standard would be that an applicant has to meet a retention percentage, and it has to be either 33% in this example of total diameter inches on the lot, or 33% of all trees. If there's 10 trees, they have to save 3 trees.
Okay, so it is based on what the current condition is. Like it's
The
not
current
that they
condition
can
of the
just
lot.
come to the city and choose, you know, I'm gonna aim for this 33% of trees over 6 inches.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a situation where you have perhaps trees that are less than 15 inches of species that you want to maintain in the canopy over time, and trees 15 inches and larger that maybe, you know, we were actively trying to remove from the canopy, say an invasive cherry, right? And so is that going to, you know, if all you have on your property are large invasive cherries?
Well, invasive trees wouldn't count.
Okay.
Towards type 2. Invasive trees you
Okay.
could remove under invasive, permit. But I want to maybe see if Christine has any response to this. All of you brought up some really good questions and points. And as Christine's on the team, the part of the team that's kind of going to be noodling with these percentages, do you have anything to say on that?
I guess what I would say is that the percentages, they're going to be, I guess, setting the percentage is one thing, and setting the correct threshold is going to be difficult, but it might change based on the type of zoning. That might have a different thing, or a type of overlay, or for their sensitive lands. All of those types of factors might come into place. But I think ultimately, exempt trees are going to be removed, and they're really, and that would also include street trees. I would think would not be included in this calculation as well. Trees within the right of way. So I think all of these comments being brought up are going to be captured in that ultimate percentage. And the ideal with the flexibility is that when you have a large tree, if you're going to retain one really large tree, say a 30-inch diameter, Douglas fir, and you have a lot of other small trees on the property, ideally, because that percent that, you have a lot of diameter inches just in that one tree, that it will like balance out the removals of the other trees. So there's the flexibility there, just because there are parts of Lake Oswego that have maybe just a handful of large trees on the property, and that's it. And then there's other parts that have younger trees that are more ornamental. So it's trying to balance the natural forest setting and the more ornamental neighborhood kind of developed subdivision settings. So it's going to be hard. It will range probably between, it'll be over 20% and less than 50%. It'll be probably somewhere in there. But I don't want to speak too much to it at this point. Yeah.
I have a question with the way the percentages are calculated. Whether it sounds like things like sensitive lands or right of way would be excluded from the calculation. So are we really talking about percentage of trees in like the developable area, where you're excluding areas that where trees couldn't be cleared for development anyway?
Yes, I would likely mark those just as an exempt trees in the right of way, unless, if it's in the right of way and you have to develop your driveway there, something like that, that might have kind of a different type of categorization. But for trees in sensitive lands, you already cannot remove them unless they're going to meet the other stipulations of the code. And Jessica can correct me but you typically cannot remove a tree in sensitive lands for development.
That's right. We have this for sensitive lands, tree removal There is a limited amount that's allowed for very specific reasons. So if you have what we call an unavoidable crossing, so if the only way you can get to your lot is through a sensitive lands and you have to build a driveway through there and you have to remove trees, we will allow you to do that. But you have to avoid, minimize impacts. If you can't avoid, you have to minimize impacts, and then you also have to mitigate. So and you have to go through a special review. It's not just a tree permit. You have to do an actual land use review for that.
Great, thank you. Any other suggestions about where to look to help kind of triangulate this percentage? We've heard a lot about like different values of different trees. And we will be looking at kind of peer cities as an instructive source, and then we'll be using these case studies and past projects to help calibrate and see how things play out. But maybe is there anything else you want us to consider before we move on to the next part of the standard as we're kind of calibrating these? Yeah, John.
So in the statistics that you're going to be doing, I mean, you're going to look back at like the last 10 years of data that we have on development. In other words, I mean, I really don't know if people have any idea what 33%, 50%, 75% means without data. If you have, say, 1,000 permits in the last 10 years that have trees that were all at 15%, or they were all at 70%, then it gives you kind of an idea of what you're dealing with. But to throw percentages out, I think it's really hard to make any sort of decision unless you have some statistics behind it, so that you have a baseline to say, hey, this is what we've been doing the last 10 years, and this is what I mean, we've got a great tree canopy, so obviously it's kind of working. And I know that we currently is the code 33%. Is that what we have now?
The code doesn't have any percentages. The code is not clear and objective, and this is the proposed clear and objective track. So right now the code is all discretionary. It's just, yeah, right. You can't remove trees if they're significant, if they're part of a significant right. stand of trees. Yeah.
So I guess it would be helpful, I would think, to help make decisions to say, hey, this is what typically is removed, or this is what's retained on a lot for what we've done in the last 10 years, because obviously that has helped work towards achieving the goal of having a good forest canopy. I don't know, does that make sense? So
yeah.
So what
yes, thank you. I feel like you've been a very good advocate for the data, and that's definitely an important you're an important voice for the data, and it's instructive to help us know what to have prepared to show you as well.
Right.
No, and oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
Well, and I guess it's the comparative for other cities. I don't know if anyone else has a 50% canopy. You know, I just think we're kind of a little unicorn, sort of a little bit. So I would look at our values are high in trees, and I'm not sure everyone else is like that, but in the comparative, but I do think that having some sort of a baseline, I don't know, when you're explaining this to people, they really don't understand what you're saying. The normal person, unless they're in the development business, or if they're not a builder or whatever. And so we have to really make this super easy for people to figure out, I guess. And so, and how they measure it. And I would just suggest that if somebody has a sensitive land part as part of as just like a normal person who owns a lot, and if they have some developments in Lake Oswego were set up so that they put sensitive lands in to lots, like the neighborhood I live in, but that's part of your total calculation of what you have for your lot. So I would say that should be inclusive of what you have for if you own a 12,000 square foot lot, that's the baseline of what your percentages is. And if you have 20% of it's sensitive lands, well, then you can't take a tree out there, but that should be counted as far as the total because it is your lot. Does that make sense? Because otherwise a property owner is going to go, what the heck are you talking about? I own the lot, so why is that not part of the calculation? So just think of it from the consumer person, the landowner, who's going to be dealing with this, that has to understand the logic. So I think we have to make this logical and kind of simple to understand. So anyway.
With regard to the data, I would say this. I mean, we obviously want to do a number of case studies to show here's some real life examples of development permits of various different types and what the current code, what the result was of the current code. And then if we were to apply the code concept, what would the result be? I can tell you we do not have enough time or staff to go through the last 10 years and try to figure out what the percentage is, just because that's not the way we collect data. So we would have to go back and physically go through every single permit to try to figure out what the resulting data was. We might be able to do that for the last year. I need to talk to Daphne Sissel, who does our tree cutting applications, to see if that could be a possibility. So potentially a year's worth of data just on what percentages are we seeing for type 2s in terms of retention. But I agree, having that data is going to be important, but recognizing we're not going to have all the data we probably want to make this decision, unfortunately. We
don't have it.
spend years on this.
I know, I understand that, but I guess it's for you to even come up with the percentage, you have to have some basis to have that. And in order for this to be credible, because folks, I mean, if this is not clear and objective, and we get a lawsuit against the city for our policy not being clear and objective, this is the kind of stuff that's going to be brought up is, well, how did you come up with this? Is this just a subjective whatever policy? So it's I just want to make sure that we're making decisions based on good data. But and Jessica, I totally know you don't have probably the time. I don't know if there's, even if you took a random sample of you could figure out of the, I don't even know what the data set is. If it's 1,000 permits or if it's 10,000 permits, you take a statistical data point and just go back and figure it out. Just so we know what the practices we're doing and what's the actual outcomes. Because again, I've said all along, we want code that's going to be good for the city, but for the most part, people really value trees in Lake Oswego, and it's a significant part of their investment in their property. And people are just not willy-nilly going out, taking out trees. They actually see it as a value. So I guess we have to give the benefit of the doubt that people are truly wanting to have the characteristics of Lake Oswego trees moving forward. So anyway.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for, your advocacy for data is very important as well. And I think it helps us also think about how we want to structure the information as well, and how we want to organize information in case studies so that we can give as much of a data-backed reasoning behind these percentages as possible. But thank you so much for your input. And we do, in terms of time, need to move on a little bit, but Jason, you're welcome to comment.
Just a quick comment to follow up on Councilor Wendland's question. There is we should have data that show changes in the urban canopy over time. That was part of the urban forest plan, right? And they did a study that showed, a time series with aerial photography. So, if we're basing off of something like that, then I think it's, maybe you don't have to dig into tree permits. You have that evidence from aerial photo interpretation to work with.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Jason. We'll take a note of that as well and include that in the research. Okay, so moving on to the third part of the clear and objective standards concept. When we talked to council, there was some back and forth and some discussion on the proposed exemption for trees in the small lot building envelope. And this code concept was included based on a suggestion from the tree task force because a building will take up a larger portion of a lot and have less flexibility to be designed around trees for the sake of preservation than on a larger lot. And the city wants to make sure that infill is achievable on small lots in order to reach housing targets. And last meeting, we had the request to pull more data on how many small lots there are in Lake Oswego. And when we went to council, we presented this data, but we haven't shared it with you all yet. So for your context, 25% of all lots that allow any type of residential use in Lake Oswego are equal or less than 5,000 square feet. And so this doesn't mean that 25% of lots in Lake Oswego are going to be impacted by this exemption. Most of them probably have development on them. And not all of them will be redeveloped or developed on, but it gives a sense of the portion of the lots in Lake Oswego that are this size. And we also thought it was important to kind of illustrate this with some diagrams as well, just to help visualize it, because like John just pointed out, these are hard concepts in code to wrap your mind around. And not everybody kind of works with bird's eye view measurement diagrams in the same way that some of our minds might work. So we wanted to create a visual for how this exemption would play out on two different size lots. So I pulled together two examples of vacant lots of different sizes here, just as an illustration. The top one is 5,000 square feet, and the gray box represents the building envelope. So this is the area of buildable land on this lot based on the R3 zoning setbacks. And based on the lot coverage standards for R3, this zone has a maximum of 50% lot coverage. So buildings and development can take up 50% of this lot, which is actually a little bit more than that gray box building envelope. So the building could take up the whole envelope here. If a developer was trying to use this whole area for the building, it would be way more difficult to achieve retention percentages if there were trees on the lot. This larger lot, and these are to scale, this larger lot is 12,000 square feet, and the whole box in the center is the building envelope, but the darker area is the maximum building size and the maximum building footprint based on a 35% lot coverage. Sorry, that is a typo on there. It's a maximum 35% for R10 zone and a minimum, it's maximum 25 to 35%, and that's just based on the height of the building if it's 2 or 3 feet. But this is assuming like maximum lot coverage is trying to be achieved. That darker box would be the size of the building. And so you can imagine if there's trees all over the lot, they likely wouldn't, all be right in the center, but there's a little bit more flexibility from the builder moving the building or reshaping it to preserve a tree or two. And the building footprint could be even smaller if they wanted to build higher. They would only, they could build 3 stories as well, and they would take up less of a building footprint. So that's just how that kind of works out visually, and on a lot, you can just see that, the darker area has some more flexibility within the light gray box on the larger lot, and there just wouldn't be any movement on the smaller lot. So we seen this illustration for the different building envelopes and just being able to visualize it in a different way and having context about how many lots in Lake Oswego are this size. We wanted to ask you as the tree task force if we should keep this small lot exemption as part of the code concepts and include it in the draft code, or if we should consider large lots as well. All lots, or just remove it entirely, since there was some back and forth from the two the council and the planning commission. So there is a risk here of losing more trees if you extend this exemption to all buildings and all lots. So we're just looking for your guidance on what to include.
Sarah, can I ask, with the example of first edition, the controversy with those small lots and big houses and tree loss was really exceptionally expressed. And how, if we go with the exemption for 5,000-foot lot, how would tree preservation occur as represented by our recommendations? Because it was very controversial, and the top illustration indicates the controversy.
Yeah, so that is a great question, and I have an example here of I put trees on the lot to kind of give an idea of what it would look like, but it wouldn't mean that all of the trees on the lot would get removed. It would just allow the trees in the center of the lot not to be kind of unreasonably restrictive or punitive towards the retention percentages. But the 50% or the 30% retention would still be required in the setback area. So it wouldn't be that the whole lot would be exempted. It would just be the trees that fall in the center, just because there's so little flexibility in development here. And because we are charged with removing barriers for housing development. But yes, that's a good point that people really don't want to be seeing large scale tree removal for development. And there are going to be some other changes in the code as well that can help address this with mitigation trees and replacements and things like that.
My concern would be
my
concern would be there seems to be a lot of wiggle room on a small lot situation if we allow for the exemption, and that more significant trees, thinking again of first edition, could be taken out with a developer saying, we don't have any other option. And yet if you see the size up and out of the homes in first edition, you see the cost to the lot.
Just very quickly, the lots in first edition are 6,000 square feet. So they wouldn't qualify for the exemption because they're 6,000 square feet. They're not less than 5,000 or 5,000 or less.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that point, Jessica. And thank you, Amy. I think that's also an important point to bring up as well. But we have some hand raises going on. Is Brandon?
Would the smaller lots be exempt from any kind of planting requirement, or is it just preservation?
Christine, are you able to answer that?
Yeah, as far as I know, they would not be exempt from a planting requirement.
That's correct. The idea is that in that small lot scenario there where it's a 5,000 square foot lot, and just to clarify, first edition does have some R3 lots. So I don't want to, but the R6 zone, which is the zone where all the single family dwellings are, those are all standard 6,000 square foot platted lots. So, but there are some lots in first edition proper that are zoned R3 that are smaller, or R0. So, but those are also smaller lots in high density areas. But the idea here is that looking at this example, we cannot, through our code, require them to build a house smaller than is allowed by the zone. So rather than having appeals filed over trees in the middle of a building envelope, what this recognizes is that the smaller a lot gets, the harder it is to preserve trees, and that we focus the preservation on the perimeter, recognizing the fact that on these smaller lots, you can fill the entire building envelope. They get extra credit if they save more trees that are actually in the building envelope. But just recognizing the fact that when you get to at some point such a small lot, they're going to fill almost the entire building envelope, or because you have such a small area, the overdig from the foundation or whatever, those trees are not likely to make it. So I think just a little bit more background about why we came up with this.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll get to the hands that are raised, and then we do need to move on to the next concept for the sake of time. But thank you, Brandon. Jason?
Yeah, I just think the lingering question for me is, if you have a 5,000 square foot lot that you're looking to develop, it's possible that all of the existing trees on the lot are inside of that allowable building footprint, or that and any remaining trees are stuck in that 5 foot offset, and those are not viable. So you could effectively end up with a 5,000 square foot lot developed that has no trees left on it. So I understand the purpose of not counting those, but how is there any mitigation included in a situation like that? Whether it be offsite or onsite.
Yeah, they would still be required to meet a canopy preservation. And they'd have to meet that either through a fee in lieu or through planting, is my understanding, is how it will be constructed.
Okay,
Yeah. And if it didn't look, and then they could always go to discretionary process too if they had a hard time figuring out how to meet the preservation percentages. But also this brings to the point of what a few people said earlier about, which trees are more valuable, like mature trees or native trees. And again, it doesn't need to be a percentage of total trees on the lot. It could be DBH. So it also depends on where the trees are and how, their maturity and their species that are taken into consideration with the clear and objective standards proposed as they are. Mark?
This is another way of thinking of it. I know that we are looking at impermeable space on a particular piece of property and not allowing more than 50% of the space to be impermeable. We could think of it as, let's make the building envelope smaller and allow for higher building. So three-story rather than two. Smaller footprint allows more space for trees to be retained. But that looks at the development code versus the tree code, and this illustrates the connection between the two and how we need to think about that.
Yeah, thank you. Good point, Mark. And this segues us really great into the preservation incentives concept, which is next. But it does sound like the team should look at how this would play out on different size lots as well. So thank you for all of the feedback here. But as Mark just kind of alluded to, there's a lot of kind of push and pull, right, with the building envelope and height and setbacks and things like that make it possible to develop and more expensive to develop. And so the second code concept did include several ideas which you're familiar with. For if the retention percentages are met, there are additional incentives for developers that they can be exempt from public notice and appeals, that there can be small dimensional adjustments in setbacks or height, both of these things. And then stormwater credits, which we didn't poll you on last time, but this came up in the work sessions with Council and Planning Commission. So both the Council and Planning Commission were generally supportive of this exemption from public notice and appeals if the percentages set in the clear and objective standards are met. But the tree task force last time did not come to a consensus on this. However, you all were in almost a 2/3 consensus around the small dimensional adjustments in setbacks and heights. It wasn't a clear 2/3 consensus, but it was 60% of those who voted. However, the Council and the Planning Commission disagreed. They felt like it was unnecessary to offer this as an additional incentive, since it would create a lot of administrative work and potentially have negative impacts on neighbors and unseemly outcomes in development. just to name a couple reasons. And the Council and Planning Commission both brought up that instead they were in favor of the stormwater credits. The idea here being that preserved trees often provide stormwater benefits. So an additional incentive for preservation that could be offered would be stormwater credits for the developer. However, after both of these work sessions, the team did hear from the Lake Oswego Engineering Department, who didn't support the stormwater credits, since Lake Oswego deals with flow control challenges that retaining large trees won't mitigate successfully. And as a reminder, there is an existing variance that developers can apply for that is not proposed to be removed. This likely will stay. And this variance allows a 50% building setback reduction for tree retention for developers. Considering that this project team recommends that we don't include this incentive don't remove this incentive from the draft concepts. So we want to hear your thoughts about this, and I see Deanne has a hand raised.
I was just wondering if you could give like a 2 or 3 sentence explanation of how the stormwater credits would work. I just don't know enough about it.
Yeah, Christine?
I'm not sure how the stormwater credits work in Lake Oswego either, but the idea would be it's my understanding that they have to manage all stormwater that falls on your site. And so you have to have a facility that does that and controls that flow. So a lot of the times now that's becoming a dry well or a bioretention facility for a larger facility. And so a large tree can't provide that guaranteed control that ideally the city really wants to see it to know that the stormwater is managed. That's the best way I can answer that because I'm not familiar with their stormwater code. Looks like Brandon might have a comment though.
I was just curious if there's been other research into other municipalities that have stormwater interception kind of benefits that include trees.
Yes, that was conducted as part of the best practices research, I believe, that led to the concept in the first place. And Christine's nodding.
So it has been implemented elsewhere, and what makes Lake Oswego different?
Well, I would say is what I can add for Lake Oswego and what is very different from a lot of communities is that we do not have the type of stormwater infrastructure that say, some communities who have a very established, curb and gutter system. We have a lot of our areas in Lake Oswego that were built under the county or county standards. So we do not have a lot of stormwater, curb and gutter type systems throughout the city. It is really, really patchy. Westlake is probably the neighborhood that I would say this would be implemented awesome there because they've already got stormwater facilities there. Stormwater credits probably would work really good there. But for the rest of the city, it is so spotty and just not set up for this kind of system. At least this is what I've been told by our engineering department. And the tracking would be and unbelievably difficult to try to track all of these different stormwater credits. I'm trying to get a little bit more information from our engineering department as well as seeing if there's other opportunities like maybe SDC reductions for stormwater. There might be some other options we can look into, but we're still waiting to get further feedback from them. But they really were not keen to this idea because they didn't think it would address the issues that Lake Oswego deals with versus other cities that have more developed stormwater systems.
Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica. And so we did start a little late today since there was some issues with people logging on. So Yuko, I'll let you have the last comment on this one.
As far as stormwater incentives, I can see that right now in the city of Lake Oswego, I believe there's like a certain threshold of developing a certain amount of square footage within the lot without having to provide a stormwater facility on site. So I could see an incentive being maybe having like a greater threshold of um, developing, uh, you know, the piece of land without having to create a stormwater facility on the property, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. We've noted that. And before we move on, I just wanted to let you all know that we did hear that you all were in support about the small dimensional adjustments, but I'm sharing the reasoning that there was some pushback on this. So onto the appeals process, evaluating the appeals process. The idea was to reduce the notice and appeals process for applicants by a week. And then if there's an appeal, it goes to the DRC or hearings officer and no longer can be appealed to City Council. When we presented this to the Council and Planning Commission, we pulled some data on the appeals that have occurred over the past 5 years. There's been an average of 3 appeals per year, and 8 of which that were appealed to the DRC were further appealed to Council. But only 1 of these decisions was overturned. So just to give some context that we did not share initially when we shared these concepts, but that the Planning Commission and Council received. So everyone was supportive of reducing the overall notice and appeals period. So that will be moving on to the code concepts. However, while you all were unanimous about a hearings officer, Council and Planning Commission had a lot of questions about what this position would look like and what the process would be of hiring this role. Generally, they were in support of a hearings officer. There's just some questions that needed to be answered and some more data that needed to be provided. But there was back and forth on whether or not this should be the decision made by the hearings officer, the DRC, should be appealable to City Council. And so I do have to share here that the team is kind of leaning towards either options 2 or 3 here. So a hearings officer being the person that receives appeals as opposed to the DRC. And then the question here is whether or not it should be appealed to Council. And we wanted to ask you if you have any comments at this point. Strong comments about which one should make it to the draft code. But we do have one more discussion question and a poll we'd like to administer before we end the meeting.
I would be in favor of option 2. This is Mark.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
I would also option 2.
I agree as well.
Sorry. I was going to say option 2 and then maybe include in the code sort of a limited time frame by which the appeal could be made. So it doesn't go on and on.
Yeah, I appreciate all that feedback. It seems like a lot of you are in support of option 2, which is really instructive. So thank you. Jeff?
How often does the council meet?
Council meet Jessica.
Twice a month.
I think the council has enough to do. If we have good hearing officers, you have 2 or 3 arborists that sit there, and maybe the appeal is take it away from the council. They've got enough to do, and maybe you have 3 hearing officers and 1 hears it and they want to appeal, they can appeal to the other 2. But I think by taking it up to the council, we're just making it much more burdensome than it should be. You could take it to the DRC. We do that now, but really, and I hate to say this about council, but both DRC and council, are not experts on trees. So if you had an arborist panel and you appoint 1 guy to hear it, and your appeal would be to one of the other two or both of the other two, and they could make the decision at the lower level.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that thought, Jeff. We have taken that down, and we can think about that a little bit more as well. But thank you all for sharing your opinions and your thoughts on this. We appreciate it. That was definitely one that was a little bit, had a little bit more back and forth, which you can imagine. It's going to be a very difficult decision to decide what to move forward with there. All right, so the fourth code concept allows residents to remove trees classified as moderate risk if they meet one of the following two requirements, that there are no alternatives to reducing the risk, or if there's demonstrable history of similar tree failure. And these are all required to be decided by a certified arborist. And everyone was supportive of this concept. So that is going to move forward into the draft concepts. And lastly, we posed a question to the Council and Planning Commission that we didn't poll you all on, but we thought we'd share it with you as well and ask your thoughts. If the clear and objective standards apply to only housing development as required by state law, or apply clear and objectives to all type 2 tree applications. Both Planning Commission and Council were supportive of having these standards only apply to housing development. And like we discussed earlier on as well, it does seem like if we applied these clear and objective standards to across the board all type 2 tree permit applications, this would create a lot more problems with some of the issues that you've all brought up. And we would be avoiding this by keeping that discretionary track as well as the clear and objective track, and not just applying these percentage retention standards across the board. So if anybody feels differently that we should be applying clear and objective standards to all type 2 permits, we'd like to hear your thoughts on this now. But we do have direction from Council and Planning Commission on this. All right, well, I am going to move on since we have 1 minute, but of course you are all welcome to put things in the chat and email us as well, and we'll record those. So the next 2 tree task force meetings we're proposing to be extended to 2 hours instead of 90 minutes. As you can see, sometimes we just have so much information to jam into these sessions, and we want to, especially with the full draft, to be able to really have the time to discuss the important parts. We will be sending that out, hopefully with a little more lead time before our tree task force meeting in March. So that you all have a good amount of time to process, ask questions, email back and forth with us for some clarifications, and so that we can really get to some meaty discussion topics in meeting number 5. Deanne, you weren't here at the beginning of the meeting either, but this is where we are going to be looking at all the other substantive issues and all of the technical issues. So this meeting 5 is where all these draft concepts, you're going to be able to review them, and we're going to be able to discuss them. And meeting number 6 will be after we meet with several other groups and refine the concepts. So you will kind of get a last look before we're finalizing them for the hearing. But I'd love to do a poll right now with a hand raise. Should the last 2 tree task force meetings be extended to 2 hours instead of 90 minutes? And I will try to send out a doodle poll. Since this is for March, I'll try to send it out well in advance so that we can find a time that everyone can make. Right, and Christina, you're getting these hands down, I'm hoping.
Yes.
Christina Sequina, yeah, amazing. Thank you. So it looks like everyone's in favor of a longer meeting next time, and I'm looking forward to getting into the draft code with you all and kind of closing the loop and circling back on some of these issues like tree replacement standards that we've been itching to talk about but haven't been outright explored in the code concepts. This is really going to be where we're able to talk about everything. So thank you so much.
So Sarah,
Okay, we did it.
Just one last thing, if people just stick around for just a second. So we're not going to see you again until March. So that's a long period of time. But I just want you all to know that what's going to be happening is our consultants are going to be drafting the code. And then the very first draft is going to be a project team draft that we are going to review. And what we're going to try to do is work out kind of the bugs and technical issues before it comes to the task force. So I understand that it seems like a very long period of time, but obviously it'll take some time to draft those codes and for us to kind of have a very quick first draft review before it goes to the tree task force. But if you have any questions in the meantime, I'm your contact. Please contact me. Hopefully you all have a wonderful holiday, and we thank you again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in March.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. I forgot that a bunch of people joined a little late, so thank you for that recap. A key part of that review is city attorney too. So I think John and a couple other people on the different commissions had questions, about liabilities to the city and things like that. And so that's something that the city attorney will look at these code concepts through the lens of, right? Like, are there some legal issues or liabilities that are baked in, and let's fix them before we bring them all to you. So yes, again, thank you so much. We'll see you in March, but my email is always open, and have a good holiday and a break.
Thank you.
Take care.